The movie starts with Eugenie hard at work in the garden, picking fresh vegetables. Dodin comes looking for her in the kitchen, and Violette informs him she's out and about. As he leaves, Eugenie returns with fresh goods and gets cooking. Violette is babysitting her niece, Pauline, and both Dodin and Eugenie welcome the extra hand. For the next 10 minutes or so, they go about making a mouth-watering dish with the loin of Vale as the center ingredient. At some point, Dodin calls on Pauline to taste the broth and savor the taste when it's been clarified. Dodin calls on Pauline again to taste the cooked sauce and asks her if she remembers the taste. She doesn't, so he urges her to name the ingredients. It was just a single spoon taste, but she successfully listed a good number of the ingredients. Dodin helps her out with the missing ingredients used in making the bourguignotte sauce she's just tasted. Eugenie is still by the stove, and Dodin goes over to her, remarking that Pauline is quite astonishing, and Eugenie agrees. Dodin shows Pauline how to obtain the perfect broth. The girl is a natural, getting it on the first try. She concurs that the taste of the broth is different now that it's been clarified. It's not as strong, and Dodin explains the idea is to soften the flavors and intensify the color. Dodin and his friends are gathered around the dining table. They're eager to eat, although they have to wait for Rabaz, who's running late because he helped deliver a baby. He finally arrives and apologizes for his delay, gushing about the experience he's just had with the delivery. They finally get to taste the consommé, and Dodin watches their expression closely. Margot comments adoringly that the consommé is gentle. Back in the kitchen, Pauline and Violette are also settled with their portion of the meal, but Eugenie is still cooking. She prepares the next dish, and Violette helps her take it to the men. It's just as impressive as the previous dish. Eugenie still has another dish up her sleeve and goes about it. But while the men are discussing French history, Eugenie is in the kitchen battling with her health. Pauline notices her fight off a dizzy spell and shows concern. Eugenie lets the worst of it slide and gets back on her feet to resume cooking. She promises Pauline that she's fine. The girls assist her with the next dish after they've had the second one. She asks if Pauline enjoyed the last meal, and the girl remarks it's the best meal yet. Eugenie finally settles with the girls to enjoy what seemingly is the last dish. It's another winner in Pauline's book. This might just be a 5-course meal, as there's yet another meal to dish out. It's the one with the veal of loin as the main ingredient. Next up is a baked Alaska. It's a dessert cake that can be set on fire. Rabaz explains to the group that it's a phenomenal dessert that can retain a flame because beaten egg whites are good insulators. This means that the ice cream within the cake will remain frozen. An American physicist discovered the phenomenon, and a chef Balzac used it to create the dessert. Pauline is having the baked Alaska for the first time, and wonders why the dessert is named after Alaska in particular, but Eugenie doesn't have an answer. Dodin's friends file into the kitchen to greet Eugenie and appreciate her for another well-spent time in the dining room. They, however, wonder why she never joins them to eat there. They try to insist that she comes to join them the next time and hope Dodin can push her to do so. She infers that for them to keep getting the quality of meals they get, she'd need to be in the kitchen. She's fine conversing with them through the food she makes for them, as there's really nothing else to say. She shoos them towards the salon where Dodin has good liquor to further entertain his guests. Pauline had heard them referring to her as an artist. Eugenie downplays it, but Violette feels Eugenie has earned the title. Eugenie brings out a book and shows Pauline someone worthy of the title. His name is Antonin Carême. Pauline asks Eugenie how long she's cooked at the manor, and she answers that it's been for many years now. Dodin didn't teach her to cook though, and she's been cooking long before she met him. Her father was a famous pastry chef in Paris, but she owes her culinary skills to her mother, as her father wasn't a patient man. Eugenie wants to know what Pauline felt when she had a bite from the dessert cake, and Pauline elucidates that she felt the overwhelming need to cry. Eugenie urges her to explain why she felt that way, but Pauline can't pinpoint her reason. Rabaz has news that Auguste Escoffier and some other person named César Ritz will open up a new place in Monte Carlo. Apparently, it will be the first hotel of its kind to offer clients haute cuisine. Rabaz opines it's not a good business move for Escoffier, but Dodin disagrees. His reasons are, Carême is a legend, and Escoffier is a promising prodigy. There's only a 13-year gap between both men. Violette ushers in a messenger from the Prince of Eurasia with a message for Dodin. The prince is inviting Dodin and his suite to dine with him at his place. To make Dodin feel welcome, the prince has his master chef to assist the chef the hotel already provides. Margot has an inkling that Dodin won't accept the invitation, but Dodin proves him wrong. The messenger can report back to the prince that Dodin will be dining with him. His 4 friends will be his suite, so the messenger promises to send out a proper invitation to them the following day. Gourmet expresses his initial doubts about Dodin accepting the invitation. Dodin reveals the first invitation came several days ago, and it's clear that the prince is insisting that he comes. Eugenie and Dodin have an outdoor dinner, and Dodin brings up Pauline. They both agree she's an exceptional kid with potential for culinary arts. Eugenie wants to take her under her wings, and Dodin offers to take Pauline home the following day, where he'll get to speak to her parents. He doesn't care for a prodigy, but respects that it's important to Eugenie. Eugenie appreciates his gesture, but wants to be the one to talk to Pauline's parents. She can imagine Pauline creating a new dish in the next few years if put under the right training. Dodin asks if he can come knocking on Eugenie's door later into the night, and it's a weird question because she wouldn't stop him. Dodin presses that she knows why he would come knocking, and wants her to leave the door unlocked. She teases he's free to knock and likely to find her room either accessible or not. Dodin has another request. It's one he's been asking for some time now. He wants Eugenie to marry him. Eugenie confirms he's asked many times before. She feels they're more of a couple than most couples because they spend so much time together studying recipes and then bringing them to life. They work fine just as they are, and she doesn't see the need to change that. Dodin still insists that their marriage can be different from the others. All relationships start with people dining first. It's a tradition even from the Bible days. Dodin and Eugenie are past dining. She chuckles at his analysis, but the message is clear. She shut down his proposal yet again. Later that night, he tries his luck and finds her door unlocked. Eugenie is having a bath and he takes a sit on a stool and just watches her. The next day, while Dodin and his friends are striding out somewhere, Eugenie returns Pauline back to her parents. The men arrive at Augustin's place. He's making ortolans, and Dodin comments Eugenie usually buys hers at the market, but Augustin's are different. He gorges the birds with millet seeds until they're tender. He then plucks them without gutting them, and they always turn out perfectly. Eugenie conveys her wishes to harness Pauline's talents and train her to be an exceptional cook. Her mother worries that Pauline is too young, but Eugenie asserts it's the right age. She tells them they can take time to really think about what's best for Pauline. She takes note of a copper antenna crowned with zinc littered around the farm and placed 20 feet apart. Pauline's mother explains the structures create an electric current in the ground that makes the plants much healthier and better. They've experimented with and without the antennas, and the difference is clear. Meanwhile, the ortolans are crisp and brown, so Augustin serves them one each. To get the full experience, they have to eat it with napkins over their heads, sticking to tradition and hiding their decadence from the eyes of God. When they're done, Augustin sets about the next dish. Boy, every time these guys gather, it's always about food. They sure love to eat. Dodin returns back to the manor and asks Violette about Eugenie. She's been in her room since she dropped off Pauline. Dodin heads upstairs and is about to knock when Eugenie steps out of her room. He's still worried about what Violette told him, but she affirms she's fine and will go about making his dinner now. On his request, she reveals Pauline's parents haven't made a decision about Pauline becoming her apprentice. Dodin pushes for his friend Dr. Rabaz to come check Eugenie's health, but she refuses, stating that it's only a waste of time. Dodin and his suite honor the prince's invitation. The prince has his master chef read out the meals that they should expect. The chef is going for 3 services and reads out what each dish will consist of in great and long detail. Dodin's friends relay how it went to Eugenie. The services lasted over 8 hours, and it was packed with so many dishes. Grimaud thought he was going to burst out of his seams with the excess food. Dodin isn't present, and Eugenie is curious about his take on the dinner service. Beaubois conveys on Dodin's behalf that the meal was a thick-set construction. It was rich and abundant, but it was chaotic and without direction or meaning. Eugenie asks about the desserts, but that, too, came with some strong criticism. The wine was good, but the order they were served in needed work. Dodin retired home and Eugenie served him something simple, in quote, with some biscuits and tea because he didn't want to sleep with the memory of the prince's meal. Who else is wondering how he still had room to eat all that after the heavy gourmet meal? He's currently studying a menu, as it's his turn to invite the prince over. His friends are eager to know what he'll decide on, and want Eugenie to divulge once she knows. She has no issue with that. Eugenie finds the men at the pen and informs them the meal Dodin will be going with is pot-au-feu. It comes as a shock to his friends, as pot-au-feu is boiled beef and vegetables. Grimaud lists the mechanism behind the dish out loud, as if to confirm that it's the right dish. Seeing no objections, he can't believe it's Dodin's choice. Dodin searches the manor for Eugenie. When he can't find her there, he goes out to the farm, near the pen, to ask his friends. They admit she was with them, but she left. Frantic, he goes towards the garden and finds a new structure. It's the antenna crowned with zinc. His attention is abruptly drawn from the structure when he sees Eugenie slumped against a tree. He calls out to Rabaz while Eugenie stirs back to consciousness. She excuses that she just fell asleep, but Dodin isn't buying that. Rabaz and the rest of the crew come rushing over. Rabaz and Dodin assist Eugenie to her feet. Inside the manor, Rabaz runs his tests and concludes she doesn't have a serious ailment. He recommends bed rest for a couple of days, and Eugenie objects, but Rabaz pleads with her to yield as he's coming from the place of both a competent doctor and a friend. Dodin sees Rabaz out and then goes about preparing a meal for Eugenie. She eats the broth upstairs and comments, "It's a nice dish." While she appreciates Dodin cooking for her, she would prefer he goes about his more important duties. Violette can take over cooking while she's on bed rest, but Dodin scoffs at the suggestion because Violette can't cook. She notices his sad demeanor, and he admits that seeing her so frail in the garden put him in that mood. She assures that she's fine now in every aspect and wouldn't mind more of the broth he's just served her. As for the prince, Eugenie wants Dodin to go ahead and invite him over because she believes she's well enough. Dodin states he has a better idea but doesn't say what it is. Before Eugenie knows it, the roles have been switched. Dodin is now the one in the kitchen while she waits on him in the dining room, dressed elegantly like she's at a 5-star restaurant. He serves her the first meal and Eugenie takes spoon after spoon, savoring the taste. Dodin keeps the dishes coming. He offers her an antique wine he auctioned from London the previous year. The bottle, among others, spent 50 years at the bottom of the sea after a shipwreck before it was recovered. He pours a glass for both of them, and they both toast. Eugenie takes a sip and genuinely thanks him for all the effort he's put in for the night. He wants to watch her eat, and she chuckles at the request but welcomes him to have a seat. He mentions a Chinese poet who worked hard for a year and then devoted the rest of his time to his wife. Dodin wishes he had done the same, and Eugenie points out that he's many great things, but is neither Chinese nor a poet. He agrees he's not a poet yet, but he's working on that. And the wife aspect. Seems he has a few tricks up his sleeves before the night ends. But before he excuses himself to return to the kitchen, he exudes the witty nature that Eugenie loves so much, sending her into a fit of laughter. Dodin sits in the kitchen for a while, as if contemplating his next action. Ultimately, he goes through with it. He instructs Violette to present the next dish facing a certain type of way. Eugenie receives her dish, and Violette relays Dodin's instructions about the positioning of the meal. Eugenie is aware because she's familiar with the dish and starts slowly turning her plate until she spots the engagement ring. She takes it in her hand and stares at it like a precious stone, short of words and on the brink of tears. Later that night, Eugenie leaves her room unlocked and lies in bed naked and accepting Dodin's touch. "Good work, Doda. You finally won the lady over." Dodin hosts a banquet on the expansive grounds of his manor, towards the lake. The turn-up is large with the men dressed in suits while the women are in white gowns and hats. Dodin makes the announcement that he and Eugenie will finally be getting married in their autumn years, and to make things even more poetic, they'll be getting married in autumn. Dodin goes on to give a speech about the beauty of autumn and formally asks Eugenie if they can go ahead and get married then. She replies with a kiss. Eugenie and Dodin take a stroll through the meadows. She references his earlier speech, arguing she's in her summer years, not autumn. She plans to eventually leave Earth on a summer day. Summer is her favorite season, and Dodin must agree. Dodin doesn't have a favorite season and appreciates simply the phenomenon that comes with the change of weather. Eugenie loves the summer sun and the burning sensation that comes with it. It's good to see them finally able to kiss and embrace freely. Back at the house, Eugenie is still smiling. She stands by the threshold of his door, and he beckons her in because his room is now hers as well. She opts instead to spend the night in her room with him. The next day, Dodin reads out the menu list for their guest, the Prince of Eurasia. It features dishes with personal touches from both Dodin and Eugenie. It's a rather short list compared to the grocery list the master chef from earlier read out to Dodin and his suite. Eugenie has her reservations about the menu. She struggles between the right term, audacious or hazardous. Dodin thinks audacious fits best. She feels the menu is barely a quarter of the prince's first course, and then there's the whole pot au feu that sticks out like a sore thumb. Dodin understands what she's getting at. The pot au feu is basically just boiled beef and vegetables. It's a simple and humble meal, so it's not something you'd expect on a high-class menu list. Dodin, however, argues that the dish is unapologetically French and traditional. He'd like to take the challenge of making the dish for the prince, adding his own personal touches so it's memorable. He'll need Eugenie's help with the challenge, though. She teases that she's not frightened by the task, but she's sure she can see Dodin wavering. Turns out she's having a dizzy spell because she falls unconscious in Dodon's arms. Rabaz comes with a second medical personnel, but they can't ascertain what's wrong with Eugenie. They have no idea what's causing her dizzy spells, and they can only hope that they fade out as quickly as they came about. The news only agitates Dodon, and they're not particularly whispering, so Eugenie hears them from the room she's supposed to be resting in. She steps out, affirming she's fine, but Dodon can't wave it off as easily as she'd like to. One minute she's fine, and the next she's not. It worries him. She apologizes for scaring him. She thanks the second doctor for coming to give Rabaz a second opinion on her health. If they can't find anything wrong with her, then it means she's fine. A frustrated Dodon storms off. They reconcile over dinner. Dodon acclaims it's the best moment of the day. While they eat, he addresses his earlier anxiousness, calling it unreasonable as he can see she's perfectly fine now. There are numerous times he's come looking for her in her room and met the door locked. Other times, it's open and inviting. But in all the times combined, there are 2 significant times she's imagined him coming up the stairs to see her when in reality he's actually in his room. In those times, he tries her door and finds it unlocked. Dodon calls Violette's attention to check on Eugenie in the early hours of the morning. She breaks down by the side of Eugenie's still body, sobbing uncontrollably. Funeral rites are carried out shortly after. Grief hits Dodon hard. He drinks and fails to eat even when Violette pleads to make him something simple. It's been 2 days since he's last taken even a morsel. He tells her to call Louis to clear the kitchen of its equipment. He also won't be needing Violette's services any longer. Dodon's friends keep him company and tell them about a dream he had. He was humanity's first cook. He told Eugenie about the dream too, but she didn't understand what he meant. He wishes he'd made her understand. One of his friends asks him not to beat himself up too much. Eugenie was able to cook to his taste and satisfaction because she had intuition and understood him against his doubts. Later on, his friends gather without him and discuss a list of possible cooks they'd like to suggest to Dodon. They can only hope that Dodon will be receptive. Margot muses that Eugenie was a beautiful woman, and they never got to discuss that more often. As for approaching Dodon with the list, Grimaud has an idea. It wasn't a very good idea. Dodon is in bed sulking when he perceives an aroma from the kitchen. He groggily goes there and finds a new cook hovering around the cooker. It makes him upset, especially seeing her wear Eugenie's apron. He yells at her to take it off and pushes her out of his house. He's quite disappointed at Violette for letting a stranger work in Eugenie's space. His friends gather to apologize to him. Grimaud takes full responsibility for the move, and Dodon is ready to let the case rest. Grimaud, however, brings up the list of cooks, but Dodon doesn't want to hear a word of it. Pauline's parents pay an unexpected visit. They relay that Pauline has been quite unhappy since Eugenie passed away. The young girl wishes to become Dodon's apprentice. Dodon can't have her as an apprentice if there's no qualified cook, and Pauline's mother assures that Pauline is insistent. Dodon is also insistent on letting the initial proposal go in vain as his hands are tied. The mother is ready to let him be, but the father knows his little girl is not acting on a whim. She's acting on sheer determination. So she can truly understand. The father politely requests that Dodon explain the circumstances to Pauline in person. Dodon agrees to honor the request. The parents leave and Grimaud hands over the list of possible cooks to Dodon. In response, he roughs up the paper and tosses it aside. Adamant, they leave another copy of the list on his table for when he's less livid. Dodon and Pauline are judges over the list of cooks. One by one, the women follow Dodon's orders to prepare a dish, and then he and Pauline taste the meal to gauge a response. Dodon's quest to find a cook like Eugenie fails. He tasked one of the candidates with a special and complicated soup that Eugenie could make quite well and was named after her. The candidate takes a look at the instructions and backs out. She offers her readiness to learn the dish if Dodon is willing to teach her. Dodon takes Pauline on as his apprentice, and they get to work in the kitchen. He gives out instructions for her to follow. Soon enough, he's ready for her to assist him in making his symbolic pot-au-feu. He asks her to taste the marrow of the dish, but it's harsh in her mouth. He explains experience will cultivate and adapt her taste, but she must put it to memory, that it's how a marrow should taste. When next they settle to eat, he gives her a bit of wine. She acknowledges it's a good wine that enhances the taste of the meat. It's called Chambolle Moussigny and was Eugenie's favorite wine. He comments that the food he and Pauline made together was good, but it was more like an outline or a sketch. He can't help but reminisce on his time with Eugenie. They worked together for over 20 years. She was a natural, able to go seamlessly about a dish as he read out the recipe. They cook together every day, and he misses her every second. Grimaud appears with a dish that Dodon must try. With every taste, Dodon can see the blueprint behind the dish. The cook has even used some techniques new to him that work well. He appreciates the dish, and Grimaud reveals the cook's name is Adele. They all set out to meet her. Memories of a particular conversation Dodin had with Eugenie come into play. She'd asked how he'd been able to have constancy and perseverance with her. Augustine told him, happiness is continuing to desire what you already have, but he couldn't say he's ever had her. It led to her next question. She wanted to know if she was his cook or wife. He took her hand and answered, cook.